Bam.
Hi, I'm Amber Brittain-Hale, and this is the Break It Down Show.
Yeah, I love, you know, I keep my topics wide on purpose because I encounter so many amazing people in life. I mean, PhDs from all the fields. And you get this because you travel a lot, even within your field, PhDing and what you guys all do. Your paper, the next person's paper, it's all this. There's not enough time to read it all. There's not enough time to like put them all together and kind of see how they all work together. And then you cross disciplines. Oh my goodness. But then you get authors, spy stuff that I talk about, baseball. It's an amazing world where you and I meet because I was considering a PhD program, and you talked candidly to me about that. But I get to have the most amazing conversations, and they blow my mind all the time. So first off, thanks for coming back, and
Of
I'm super
course.
excited to talk to you.
I'm excited to be here. And we happened to meet a couple of years ago as you were looking into that PhD program. And I think you made the choice that was correct for you. Just like when I made it, for myself to go back and get a higher degree, that was the right choice for me. And I enjoyed
Yeah,
it. And I'm glad that I did. So here we are.
here we are. Here we are.
Here we
And
are.
10 plus years later, it's, no one's going to give me an award for this, but it's like I have a PhD in learning about all these different amazing things and hearing constantly contrary points of view. And we have these conflicts going on in Ukraine and Russia. I knew I knew nothing and thought I knew something, and I didn't know the first thing. I mean, this has gone totally in different directions than I would have imagined. This Israel versus the terrorist Hamas. I can't even begin to like what in heck. If you would have told me that Iran would be brought to their knees, possibly, I wouldn't have believed you. Like it's all so crazy. What do you make of this world we're in right now?
Well, spending a lot of time in think tank world, there was so much talk of polycrisis. Polycrisis, we are just inundated in think tank world with polycrisis, trying to solve all these problems all at the same time. And it was this circular firing squad. Let's write some papers. Let's talk about it. Let's dig into the philosophy of war, what's just war, what is correct, then overlaid with this climate, and really, none of that solves the day-to-day issue of, is there peace in our time? What can we do to diminish conflict and solve polycrisis? Well, it needed action, is what it needed. And kinetic action, diplomatic action, business action to bring about a realignment, to be honest. And I have definitely fallen out of favor in some circles to say, why are we talking about this? This is a doom loop. I haven't
Yeah,
heard a single proposal out of this academic work, so to speak. When I go to business conferences, it's entirely different though. There is a solution for every problem. And that maybe that's the problem with academia. We're focused on the gap, and you're looking for this space of what's been studied and what you can study. And there's not any pursuit of what is the problem. No one's investigating the problem. In the business world, they are. And so you reference something more interdisciplinary, and that is where I think I fall in. I teach in a business school, international business program, MBA, as well as doing my international relations foreign policy analysis. And that's where I see the real nexus, the foci needing to be is the overlap, because we have one side, the United States, for instance, right now, talking the business case. And then we have other, allies and adversaries kind of going with the older, like rules-based order. But but where's the solution to the problem in that? So that's where I see it. Is this is a shift. It's a shift away from business as usual
right.
to the business case of international relations. So yes, I think there is tumult for sure, but the Iran piece was just astonishing in that operation, the
Yeah.
stealthiness of it, the success of that. And can we say that word on your podcast, obliterated? Like, are we allowed to say the word
I think
obliterated?
so. Yeah, I think
Because
so.
it's so interesting, just the word games around
Oh my gosh.
foreign policy and
Right.
foreign policy action. We can't say obliterated. We have to say maybe, kind of, sort of, and just it's so dampened when really
I
we
know.
should be enthusiastically embracing a change of policy, a change of decision making, and a change of how business is conducted overall in all the realms. And I'm here for the overlap.
Yeah, I love all that. We try a lot of things, and when we are trying to, we have very smart people, but I've got to be honest, and I think we had this conversation. I'm hesitant to buy in to somebody with Harvard credentials or Kennedy School of Government, more specifically credentials. These folks tend to miss out on the basic things, like what's possible on the ground. I don't know how to fix the Hamas and Israel problem, but I guarantee you it's not going to be done in DC. You have to understand what reality is there. You know, a lot of folks get really desperate to make decisions about things when they have never even been there. They don't understand the people, or if they've been in a traveling bubble. All of these things create problems. And one of the problems with our political and our foreign policy class is that there's no accountability when you get it wrong. And there's a lot of ill principled behavior. I'm actually trying to start up. We'll see what happens. I'm trying to start up a nonprofit that focuses on principled behavior. Like, hey, if you're going to encounter another nation's females, you better have a professional license to do that, because you can't just go in like we did and half-ass it and be like, oh, Amber's a lady, she can handle it. Like, no, that's not a license. That's not how you handle this. And if someone handled their interaction with our women in the same way, we would be upset about it. So we lack the professional license to do these things. And look, the Army can do a lot of things. They can't do everything. So it's problematic when people who get a certain idea, like, hey, we have to have war with Russia, we have to win it, it's going to go this way, and you write papers, and your whole career is based on this. And then a war with Russia shows up on your front door. Well, you only have the answers that you've studied your entire career. You don't have someone like, in this case, Donald Trump saying, hey, why don't we just make a better business deal and make sure that these guys have enough to eat and they can be stable? Because the last thing we want is a wobbly, unstable Russia. But I swear to God, a lot of our academic class are desperate to knock Russia over, and they don't think about what happens after that at all.
Well, I think that's where the business case comes in, the second and third order effects of foreign policy decisions. And I'll reference one particular thing, the USAID, just the defangment of that organization. Here in the United States, was definitely a lobby that was hyperbolic over the dismantling of this aid. They kept calling it aid, aid, aid. And yet when it fell apart, so many foreign nations were like, we are delighted that this apparatus is gone. It was so destabilizing for our population, for our economy, for our elections, for everything that we've been trying to do. This agendized purity test, not even Western values, more of these like progressive type values. Foreign countries have collectively said, we are delighted that this is gone. We don't want this interference. So the Russia piece is part of that. Russians can decide for themselves what kind of government that they want. And when they decide they've had enough, well, it's turned over before, it can turn over again. I don't think that it's up to us, the American taxpayers, to continue to support regime change. I think those things come about when it's appropriate. So to prop up or to knock down, I have some real concerns about the academic positionality on that. I think that's up to the Russian people in particular. But I think the USAID story needs a deep dive in the consequences. Again, second and third order effects of spending money in these places. And you see it unraveling in real time. And, for so long, I'm sure everyone thought, oh, this is earthquake relief and all these good things. And turns out none of that is correct. And what is it? 10 cents of every dollar actually makes it to its purpose. So I think a re-examination, re-underwriting, like your own beliefs about where you think you're being helpful and what you're doing. But the alignment of states is part of that. I think one thing the Trump administration has done and been very clear about is there's not a purity test anymore. This is peace through strength, and we're going to focus on these core things as a nation, and therefore we're going to reflect this in our posture globally. And that is, does it make America safer? Does it make America stronger? Does it make America more prosperous? And those effects from this like philosophical clarity, I think, that is going to be monumental in the change and understanding what are the goals in Russia, for instance. This will take a minute to be absorbed into academia. That is my opinion. It will take a minute to absorb the new realities into academia.
Part of the challenge with USAID was the fact that it was hard for them to reliably achieve whatever goal they said they were going to accomplish. Part of it is because a lot of the money got siphoned off to make other people wealthy. Some of the money needs to go to people so that they make enough money to get good people. So that's true too. But everything they do is brief well. It's like, oh, well, we're going to make sure all the kids and all the schools have cotton socks, not Orlon, because Orlon is non-natural. So we're going to have cotton, whatever the thing is. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. All right, yeah, let's do that. Then nobody goes to the village and goes, let me see all them socks. They just act like it doesn't matter. And so when you're a guy like me on the ground and you see USAID saying they're going to do all these things, and I love that you said this. I'm a firm believer. Whenever I see USAID show up, they are a net destabilizer. They are destabilizing this place. So is state. So are those Kennedy School of Government grads. They don't know how to reliably be dumb, shut up, learn, go slow, make mistakes, and fix those mistakes and go forward and help people. They refuse to understand the condition of the people that they're trying to help. They refuse to. And that is why I'm totally glad with USAID getting a haircut and possibly even going away. These people aren't going to eat. Okay, maybe show them to me. Show them, because they don't, for the most part, they don't exist. Do we help some places? Sure. Have we spent billions of dollars teaching Arab men how to do Microsoft Office and the suite of tools? I mean, yeah, why? We've gone to foreign places and acted like we had to tell the women there about feminine hygiene, like they don't already have menstrual cycles when we show up. It's fucking ridiculous when we do these things. And then when they brief, it's like, oh, we did this, and now these women all have periods and it's all okay. And it's like, no, you have no idea what happened. So no one went behind you to check your work, ever, ever, ever. And it does tear apart nations. They hate it. They hate being forced to do things, especially when there's no cultural intelligence involved. There's nobody. Everybody talks about EQ. CQ is upstream from EQ, and if you don't have cultural acuity, don't mess with other countries. So says Pete.
Well, I agree, but number one, how many people were saved from hunger? Let's do an analysis. How much money was spent on food? How much food was delivered, as an example? And I think Marco Rubio has it correct now. He's rebranded. This is almost like the new marketing. It's going to be stamped with USA label, not USAID. It is going to be known that our food, which the United States still distributes more food than any other nation, provides more aid than any other nation, like actual assistance hasn't dried up. The funnel or the net destabilizing effect of USAID, I think this is a worthy battle to have picked. I do, in spite of the public blow up over it, because again, this is coming from camps who haven't really done the analysis of how many kids were saved, what did you do, and also cotton socks. If you aren't washing them and everyone has trench foot because of a wet sock all the time because it doesn't dry. Like there are cases about this. Or safety boots. Never ever take off your safety boot, for an example. This is a known thing. Well, then people are showering in the safety boot and not taking it off in some cultures. Again, the trench foot thing, it seems really small, but you have to be back to what you said, the cultural acuity. The instruction manual must include to remove the boot. It just does, if you're going to be providing that. And I know that's a small thing, but it's also the arrogance of the piece. And there's a lot of African scholars who point out the difference in what African nations are doing, for instance, compared to Singapore, because there was never this same arrogance imposed on Singapore as there is on African countries. So to allow Western Africa, for instance, into deregulating their industries and becoming more self-sufficient in a Singaporean case, that would be more appropriate. And they are clamoring for that independence and the home rule, if you will. And I think that's an important piece to be able to advocate and say, we want to do it this way. Instead, we want to be self-sufficient. We don't want these rules imposed on us. And also the American ideal, or the American access to unlimited energy, is part of the success. And that's not the
Yeah.
same in other nations. But then the climate rules are strangle innovation and
Yeah.
business development. And back to the goal of our conversation here is the business approach working? And I think all of that falls under it, is like the autonomy, the sovereignty of each nation should be permitted. And if there's a case for doing business, I think that will, the rising tide lifts all boats. And I think that's an important consideration. I look at the Rwanda DRC peace deal. There's a business case there
Yeah.
underlying the treaty. And I think that's important. Like, and also the Cambodia Thai deal. Do you want to do business with the United States? Well, if you have a border skirmish and a war, like there's no business happening. So enjoy your war, but there will be no trade. And those two
Yeah.
countries in particular need it. And it's an interesting way to leverage now. I think that's important.
Yeah. The Donald Trump, and he did this in his first administration. It's a lot faster and cleaner now. He's a lot more people on his side. We should always be suspect of the government, and so we need to make sure we remain skeptical. But I'm all about trying to figure out how to keep China and Russia stable so that they're not, unstable. China has an exploding middle class. This should be a good thing for everybody, because the Chinese love their kids too, and they want AC. When I was in Iraq, farmers always say the best things. This farmer said to me, "Pete, you've been here forever. You guys have spent $1 trillion. This is 20 plus years ago, 15 years ago." And like he said, you guys have figured it all out. But and he said this, I can light the dirt in my yard on fire because there's so much oil in it in the ground here. How come we don't have a high tension energy grid throughout this nation? And it's like, well, that's a motherfucking good question. And I write that down and give that to the boss, because we have all these things we're trying to work on, but there's no country that's going to be stable if it doesn't have reliable energy to run lives. It drove them crazy to look at when the fan would shut off. That would tell you that there was no electricity. They would look up at it, and you could see them just seethe. And then I'd ask the question, "What are you looking at?" I know what he's looking at. It's like, I'm looking at the fact that the power is out again, and I'm wondering when it's going to come on because my wife is doing, and it's like all these problems are stacked because there's no damn electricity, right? And so you're right. Our energy policy is bad as just from the jump. But to put it on somebody else, just so they have to behave in a certain way when they haven't even got what we've got, is a bad way to make friends in the world.
Totally agree. And I think that's one really key component of the current administration is the energy policy. That is a primary focus. And the two individuals, Chris Wright, who's only done energy for his entirety of his career, he is excited to tackle this. Like, we're bringing back nuclear, we're bringing back a stable base load. And then Doug Burgum, same thing as at Interior. There's abundant natural resources in the United States, but it's also exportable. And some of these peace deals and trade deals really are predicated on energy abundance. And let's look at the deal last week with the EU. There's a predicate of the energy abundance and buy your energy over here instead of in Russia. And we'll cut off that funnel of funding. I think that's kind of the story with India in the past couple of days. Like, quit selling your oil to Russia, or you're getting a stronger tariff letter. So enjoy that. But it all goes back to the energy and the energy abundance. And I think those two individuals that I named are very focused on not only America's energy profile, but what that does globally speaking is to have baseload. And the founding father of Singapore mentioned the key or the distinguishing feature of Singapore compared to other nations was air conditioning. And so you look at Europe in particular with very low levels of air conditioning and their rate of death every summer, old people dying because it's too hot. There's no air conditioning. So just from a productivity standpoint, when you're hot and you're suffering and you're going to die in your apartment without this thing, that's problematic. But the underlying premise is, do you have a stable grid, a base load? And you're right. Why doesn't Iraq have that? Well, one of the first countries that we mentioned in this discussion is Iran. That's why Iraq doesn't have that,
Right.
is the malfeasance of their neighbor. And you're having to constantly put out fires instead of build infrastructure. And
Yeah.
then tumult in the society, the sociological, religious, faction getting in the way of development.
Yeah. I want to come back to religion. Maybe we'll get to, maybe we won't, but you've said a lot of things there that are powerful. Uh, and the interdisciplinary in me says, hey, we can always bring somebody else in. You can't have too many people, but you got to have the right kind of people so we can understand things. One thing we've learned repeatedly over the last, well, at least been exposed to, whether we learned it or not, it's a different story, is our energy policy and this desire to stop global warming, now called or climate chaos, and all these things, rebranding it all the time because we're struggling to understand what the goal is. There was a belief a long time ago that we had reached peak oil back in the 70s. And now there's a belief that the earth just produces petroleum. What? I mean, that's great. And it's a theory, right? But there's evidence to back the theory. And so we have this complicated energy policy. So this guy from Berkeley, and he's like, hey, I'm a seismologist, not even an energy guy, right? Seismologist. And he's like, if we don't, in some cases in LA specifically, if we don't extract the oil, it's going to be worse for the environment. And there's areas where like a fire will run over these energy seeps where there's gas just coming out of the ground. And because we don't account for that, because we want to just cap everything and act like no oil exists and it doesn't help anybody, it's a torch. And so when the fire goes over this area, it's like, and then it gets worse, right? It exacerbates this problem. And we're just now starting to understand because dudes like him, and by the way, he comes from goddamn Berkeley, right? And so he's like, hey, we got to study this and figure out where we need to cap, where we need to drill, because the earth behaves in a different way. And just so we all understand, methane, which seeps out of our reservoirs, seeps out of the earth, is a lot worse of a greenhouse gas, but we don't ever talk about methane. So we have these interdisciplinary problems where if we don't discuss it, how do we ever deal with the policy aspect? How do we then find a politician capable of enacting such a crazy thing as let's go look for all of the seeps around Southern California and possibly extract oil? I love when you've probably heard this, like it'd be in the news, like, well, it's expensive here in California. We're on an oil island. We got to bring it all in from somewhere else. And that person's standing literally 5 yards from the red tar pit. And it's like, come on, man, you can't do this stuff. So we have our own problems with understanding how to accomplish these grand goals that we have. And it just seems like we get simple things wrong. And why not? Why not try a business case? And if the business case isn't going to work, well, then what is going to work? If tariffs are going to make everybody broke, well, then what are we going to do? Because what we were doing wasn't working. And that's why we changed over a lot of the government, because reform was in style.
Okay, you've made some good points, but I think part of it is those policy papers originally, those double and triple down on original research without doing new research or understanding what we're talking about. So you take this old premise and you continue to expound on it and take it literally, but you haven't reinvestigated. And when you go onto Retraction Watch and you see all of these papers that have been called back in healthcare or called back in environmental policy because the data isn't replicable.
Yeah.
And yet we have lawmakers today going hyperbolic in the chamber about this energy policy that they haven't reinterrogated. They actually know nothing about. They have never read the findings themselves and come up with their own conclusion. There's like the talking points that have been passed around, and energy abundance. I'm limited in my scope and how much I can cover the science of it, but will say writing or reviewing for journals. Here's the problem I come across. Just whether it be discourse analysis or diplomacy or President Trump in particular. There's a lot of citations that are old, they're outdated, they aren't contemporaneous to anything. And I'm like, if you don't have something, let's say about Trump 2.0, again, this is just an example.
Right.
If you're using citations from 2017 and 2018 and nothing from 2025, this research has no relevancy whatsoever. You are not in current times. You're not in contemporary times. You haven't kept up with his stated policies, the policy change, the evolution of this individual who was in office 4 years, out of office, gathering strength and coming back. Like this isn't current. And the same goes with every other field of academia and pursuit. If you're not constantly reinterrogating and bringing in data or having AI for all the files, let's say, that are kept at FDA, they have 800 bazillion pieces of paper, it turns out, filed away that haven't been inventoried. There is so much out there that needs to be re-explored instead of just foreclosing around a conclusion, never to revisit it. So again, that's just my short example of when I review. I'm a pretty harsh reviewer. Like, I'm going to need you to come into modern times and quit referencing the Old Testament here, because this isn't correct. And it's not plausible what you're asserting because your data is so old. It's just not correct.
Yeah, man, that is so good. And that jumps right over to the current conflict. And I know we've talked a little bit about this on offline, but the nonsense that's spread about Hamas and Israel fighting. Hamas is a terrorist organization. You don't have to like that designation, but that is a fact. And they got there for a reason. Palestine doesn't have a state for a reason. They've walked away from the table a number of times. And we're struggling to have clear communications, including, and we've broken this down on my show before, the New York Times repeatedly going to the Hamas Ministry of Health. Ministry of Health, it's a terrorist organization. They don't have a Ministry of Health. But going to them for data, and all of the data subsequent that comes out from the reporters on the ground is the same numbers. And so we get lied to by the press, who damn sure should get that stuff right if they want to be respected. And so they're selling off their respectability because, oh, well, we're going to do a retraction, full retraction, story completely removed from the web. But it's too late. It's already gone out. And there's millions of people now that think that there's an active genocide, that there is an active design by Israel to starve all these people out, that Hamas somehow should become the state leader of a Palestine that France is going to recognize and Spain is going to recognize. That's insanity based upon what I would say is largely an information operation. That doesn't absolve Israel from any kind of charges that may come up against them. They have to stand in front of the man as much as anybody else. But if you want to believe John Spencer, and it's his job to look at this stuff, they're the most upright country that's ever had a war, and they've done their best to sort out who is and who isn't a bad person. So it's the same kind of thing as the academic things, where we believe old things. We're all guilty of it, but you're right. The technology and the papers, they move fast, and they start to disagree with what we thought we knew.
John Spencer, I think, should be the spokesperson for this conflict. Number one, I think he has just a really deep analytical clarity and therefore philosophical clarity about the matter. But the technology piece is important too. There are firsthand accounts that live stream the events all day long. You can find them on X, you can find them on Telegram, and you can see precisely, here's all the food aid, for instance, sitting here, not being distributed, but here's the Gazan humanitarian foundation that is bringing in food and doing a job successfully. But I've done this exercise with my students. I showed them the video that went viral like last fall, River to the Sea, when people were interviewed. What river, what sea? If you don't know what river and you don't know what sea, then launching a protest down the bridge in Sydney, Australia, and, out there with your flags or your tent campment on your college campus, I don't think you're qualified to be there, to be honest. You don't have any historical understanding. You haven't dug into the issues. You can have feelings about it, absolutely. But to start advocating a pretty harsh position, such as, the BDS movement, and you're not going to come to work, that the hostage taking situation at Google last year, when some employees locked up the office and they wanted Google not to invest in some Israeli company. It's like your feelings are going to cost, I don't know, was it like $8 billion or something in a deal? You don't get to bring your feelings into work. And also, you don't know what you're talking about. Back to my original question, river and sea. If you don't know the difference and you're like, I think it's the river in Gaza. No, that's not the answer. you're not correct. You know 0.0 things about this. That's where I would sit is
Yeah.
how are we, how is the New York Times, as an example, publishing what they publish? Well, it's because they have a long history of this, starting with the Holodomor and just earning Pulitzers for bad, flawed reporting. And I think that the newest revelations for the Russiagate prove that journalists are in the bag, they're fed a narrative, they push it out there, they win prizes for this reporting based on, like, it's meant to be for news, for journalism. It's not a fiction prize. And
Right.
that's really what it's turned into, is a fiction prize. So the narrative from mainstream media, I've always been a skeptic when I receive information, regardless of the source. I like to interrogate it myself. And I think that's one of the key problems with Israel, in that it needs a more robust public diplomacy campaign, even though I think their spokespeople do a great job explaining this is what we did. This was the operation. We've investigated this. I just don't think it gets circulated as far and wide as the counter, the Hamas narrative, and that's a
Right.
TikTok problem. That's a TikTok problem. But I'd also say that past administrations have been almost the Hamas lobby. I think in the Biden administration, Jake Sullivan talking about it's the quietest the Middle East has ever been. Like, my guy, what are you talking about? It
Right.
it's just a failure of imagination, a failure of interrogation, a failure of really understanding conditions on the ground. I'm not saying sign me up for the job, because I think I can do it better, but I would say I'd like to work on the team that provides you information, because this isn't correct. This is really so sclerotic and narrow what you're looking at. But the TikTok social media battle of narrative, I think Israel does lose that, and that's not correct. But back to John Spencer, I think he does an excellent job breaking down the issues to say, point by point, this is the number of casualties, this is proportionality, this is how war goes. And all of you armchair war experts are just not correct.
Yeah. Then the Jake Sullivans, the Susan Rice's, they're so entrenched in the system. Doesn't matter how wrong they are. Max Boot, I'm going to say his name out loud. Max Boot knows nothing about modern conflict. He gets paid a lot to talk a lot about it, but couldn't have been more wrong, because someone like me is on the ground going, what the fuck is he talking about? It doesn't work. So you can pick both parties. There's people on both sides who've gotten this stuff wrong. Now President Trump, by the way, stop making me have to defend President Trump. I don't even like the man.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like if anyone says anything positive about the Trump administration, you're in the camp. And I think that I've explained many times at conferences, like, I am apolitical in my analysis. I will call balls and strikes. Some things I like a lot, and some things I don't care for.
Yeah.
And I think, but I have never had Trump derangement syndrome either. I take it as it comes. Here's a piece of data. Do I like this? What do I think this is going to do? And I take a beat.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think you're a Trump apologist, but I think being a fair arbiter of information is critical for all people. And when you look at the population of who is the most radicalized against the current administration, current policy, and it's college educated white liberal women, that requires its own study. What is it that is contributing to this pathology? Like, why is this the demographic that's out interfering with ICE interdictions? Why is this the population out in front of Tesla? Why is this the group that are making the cry videos and who also hate Sydney Sweeney? Like, what is it in today's contemporary topics, this like cultural acuity? What is it that's creating this particular, I'll call it voting block? I think it's really interesting, and I'll do what I can to never fall into that trap. Like,
oh my gosh, or pull yourself out as soon as you find
The group think. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
in book clubs. I'm in book clubs, and it's just between the bad fiction that they choose to read and then the conversations. Like
yeah.
I have to choose between a PhD circle or the book club, and rock in a hard place is what I'd say.
I legitimately didn't know who Sydney was. I really still don't know because I just don't watch the news, and so I'm aware that that became a thing because it jumped into my feed, and I didn't ever see the ad. I'm aware now that it's a Gene ad, but um, I I didn't even when I saw her, I thought she was that other blonde girl. I can't remember her name too, but obviously beautiful. Another actress who's done really well. I think she was in Clueless. She was one of the girls from that. Who I thought that's what I thought it was. And then I discovered, and all I know is like, yeah, that's a gorgeous girl. She's wearing tight clothes. She's young. She's got big boobs. Okay, great. Yeah, that's not new to have a woman like that in their ads. I mean, why are we even talking about this? It's
Well,
not pointed at me. I'm an old man, but it's so insane that became the driving things. Like, is this Nazi anything? Like, that just makes me go, that's ridiculous. And then I look at this poor lady who's being put in this fight that makes no goddamn sense.
she's become a cultural battle, and that is just astonishing to me. It's
Yeah,
astonishing to me, but I think it's because for 5 years, more or less 5 years, a beautiful girl like her wasn't featured. But if you go back to more historical stuff, Cindy
right.
Crawford in the jeans walking to get the Pepsi can, like that was a
Yeah,
transformative ad at the time. And recognizing beauty in the like in the classic sense of beauty, which is proportional, like
yeah.
the measurements of a woman that goes back to ancient Greece and philosophy. Like this is it's almost mathematical. So
Hmm.
she is beautiful and she should get credit for that. I don't know why this caused the complete and total meltdown, but it's made it into diplomatic discourse. If the president starts posting about it, then it has jumped into mainline
Yeah.
diplomatic discourse. This is a thing. But I'll say one thing about President Trump is he has his
Mm,
finger on cultural trends like
boy.
no one ever has. And that is part of the magic of his his leadership is he gets it in the 80-20 issues. The 80-20
Yeah.
issues. And I think he's even said like, no, these are more like 99 to 1. And I don't think he's incorrect in that to like burn down the internet with your cry video of how
Yeah.
this eugenics genes ad, again, these are the same, this is the same cohort almost that is pro Hamas and wearing their keffiyeh that they got on Etsy and having the tent campment. Like I'm just not about that, but I have been fortunate to teach in a couple universities that don't have this kind of population. I taught
Yeah.
at a D3 sports school for a long time, and my students were just amazing. And they were there because they played sports. They weren't into like the politics of it. And my current university is international students who want an American business degree. And again, the like the agenda is the politics of it. That's never a part of the the conversation. So I have the good fortune of being able to say, what are the data telling us? Let's look at this. What is a business case here? What do we understand? Where's AI
Right.
going? What are your views on risk and tariff, that kind of thing? And I love that piece of it because higher ed
Yeah.
is under a lot of pressure for its agenda, number one, and I think rightfully so. But I'm just mentioning I feel pretty blessed to not be exposed to it in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I was saying before, Harvard, I don't take that school seriously anymore because they're clearly not what they once were. And they put out people that aren't humble. And and that creates problems. Anyhow, so let's move beyond that. I want to get back
Okay.
to the business case with Donald Trump because this is interesting to me. There's a lot of economists that have been so far, and these things change, but so far they've been wrong. The economy was going to go into the crapper. It wasn't going to work to driving things. The money was going to be passed on to us. By the way, I went to Costco the other day and we spent $600, and it wasn't even that full of a cart and didn't have that much meat in it, right? And so I'm thinking, hey, we got to do something because this here, I don't have a lot of money. I have very, very, very modest means. And I'm like, dang, that's a hit for us to do this. Right. And so now I have to now change part of my monthly budget because that's more than what we allotted. And we didn't get that much stuff. It's a pile, it's Costco, but man, oh man, it's still not better yet. I know I could use some relief living on a very tight budget.
I think you're correct in like prices went high and they have remained high. So
Yeah.
the business case so far has been in the macro. What is the United States taking in terms of tariff revenue and lessening the deficit? And those are significant changes. Those have moved the marker a significant amount. As far as like the daily prices, I think
Mm-hmm.
there's some issues to be considered there, and interest rate is part of that. I know that is frontline news every single day. Jerome Powell and the interest rate, and this is a battle of our times. And when you hear one side of the aisle speak about it, they're like, people can't get business credit. They're maxed out on their credit cards, and the real estate market is locked up entirely. The people that own homes are boomers, and they're not actually wealthy, but they bought either a long time ago or they bought in that 2021 pocket, and they have a 3% loan on their house.
Right.
So real estate is jammed and there's no liquidity, there's no movement, I should say, in that market. So all these other things are frozen in time as well, the high prices. And I don't know if you saw it recently, but the Democratic Party, like at Democrat, posted this chart on X to show how high prices are. And within seconds, they are ratioed within an inch of their life. They end up deleting it because the chart that they show, and you can call this up, is this block of time showing sky high prices. Okay. And it goes up in 2021 to 2025. So all the ratio is like, yep, Biden, yep, you nailed it. So it's this own goal of showing why prices are high, when inflation went up to, what was it, almost 9%. And even though it's down to 1.8, we are still carrying the tab of those 4 years of economic policy. So while some things have gone down in price, eggs significantly, that was a campaign issue, eggs, the overall basket of goods is still really expensive, but it's also partly because of the credit piece. And I think that will have a resolution soon. I see some movement going there. One of the Fed governors resigned after the meeting. There's a lot of pressure and some lawsuits on Jerome Powell to be more transparent what went into the discussion. I think it's only a matter of time. So I think that's the piece that needs to change and start getting more velocity in the real estate market in order for prices to come down. But I remember going to Costco, I don't know, like 2022 for Thanksgiving, same thing. That was the first time the basket had cost me $700. And I was like, I have to switch some money around or something. I've got all these kids coming into town for Thanksgiving break. This is not correct. You found it. Okay. They posted this themselves.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There we are. Yeah. We're still there. So what's going to bring down the pressure? I think there's a couple of things that will bring down the pressure, but I think it starts with interest rates. At least that's my business case, to say some of these like more smaller country specific issues need to improve.
One of the challenges too is when we talk about the inflation, for example, or shrinkflation or whatever it's going to be, the challenge is folks will straight lie to us, but we're still going to Costco. I'm still buying eggs at $9, for a dozen, right? I'm like, God damn, what are these eggs made out of? And maybe eggs need to cost $9, but then everything else has to change too. So, but they never talk about the slope of the slope. Like, oh, it's down 1%. Yeah, motherfucker, from all the way up here. Like you got Duke for half a second, and then what's going to happen? And so they'll whoever the they is, they lie about these stuff and act like we can't tell that things are not as stable as they need to be. Like, look, yes, when you go through LA and there's a riot going on, most of LA is completely peaceful and there's nothing going on and we're all safe. But you can't tell me the police are overwhelmed by a bunch of kids. Not in LA County. There's too many resources. And so when they lie to us, it's like, come on, stop lying. Stop lying about this. Stop acting, both sides, stop acting like this is something more than what it is, a failure to police people. You and I, we all know our Weber. And if you don't, here's what Weber says, everybody. If the government can't do the thing, well, then the people will do the thing. That's super simple, but that's the bottom line. And so when you cannot control the demos in a way that's above a kind of a basic line, it doesn't get better. It doesn't get better.
Well, you've brought out a point, like people will do a thing. What do people most want in their day-to-day living from to their neighborhood, their city, their state? They want to be able to go to the job that they've chosen, have gainful employment. There's some very basic factors. They want peace, security, happiness, and it doesn't extend far past that. So much research has shown these are very basic hygiene factors. And it's the same thing when you're working for an organization. Do you need all the bells and whistles and the custom granola bars in the break room? Or are you good with great pay and a leader that listens to you and the ability to turn off the Slack on the weekend? Are you really, what do people expect? They want some security. They want a guarantee. They don't want the defacement of public buildings. They don't want to riot in the street. They want to be able to call a Waymo without having it incinerated. There's really basic things that people are asking for. But the visual piece and politicians' untruthfulness, those are in contradiction. What you can see for yourself and what's on social media or alternative channels is in direct contradiction to what you hear from elected leadership. Now we can go into California, a deep dive, and what a failed state.
Oh my God.
This place is, even though it's replete with natural resources, beauty, and the best weather in the entire world.
Yeah.
But the governance is just so complicated and why does it have to be this way when you are given all the resources? This is honestly like a case study in state governance. So you can compare California to any country around the world. How is it governed? It's I just don't know that you're doing the most with what you've been given. But the piece of what does elected leadership tell us? It contradicts facts on the ground for sure. And people can see that with their own eyes. And they can see if they're spending $200 at Trader Joe's and they get 3 bags of groceries with a celery and some fun crackers to try, or is it spilling over and you could also grab the flowers, all the frozen things you've ever wanted to try as well. And then you can also get a Starbucks on your way out of the parking lot. You might be spending the same $250, but what you're getting is less. And that's what people noticed prior to the election. And when elected leadership was no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And people knew it wasn't fine.
Yeah. Yeah, especially because at the end of the last Trump administration, before COVID hit, people were paying off credit cards. Debt was going down and folks were doing all right. And again, I'm not a Trump guy, but his financial policy then seemed to be working. Then a crazy pandemic happened. But I don't think folks have recovered from that hit. I know certainly I have to dip into credit every single month and I'm desperate to pay it off. But I live pretty simply. I'm struggling to get on top of that. And certainly that's cut into my investments, and I didn't do enough the last 5 years in investments, partly because just didn't have any surplus. I was more hand to mouth, and by hand to mouth, I mean living on credit. And I'm smart enough to know that's not good. I'm supposed to be getting paid credit, not the other way around. But this is what happens with our policy when we can't seem to get a hold of it. So I'm hopeful that this tariff policy and the improved trade deals, and here's one thing I don't understand, Amber, maybe you can help me out with this. If we're getting better deals with Great Britain, with all of Europe, and they're going to buy more of our energy, I'm struggling to understand what's a bad thing about that. Maybe down the road, something, we didn't see this coming, but given where we were and where we are now and the commitments, Japan's market open to American companies, oh my God, that to me seems, I don't care who did that. And I'll take as many wins as Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick can line up. I don't know who those dudes are, but goddamn, every time I see them, and I'm like, hey, thanks for doing that. I've not thought that about the government in 25 years, easily. I'm like, wait, who is this? Jake Sullivan. Oh my God. That's usually what I think. But now I got Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent on my side. And I forget, you said the Secretary of Energy. I'm stoked that these guys are trying to do these things. Maybe they'll fail, But that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like these guys. I'm like, oh my God, they're not just saying that we suck and that we're shitty and we don't have enough of this. And they're going like, hey, we got a lot of opportunity here. All right, tell me more.
Well, those two individuals in particular, I think, are doing an incredible job. And if you've ever watched the All In podcast, Howard Lutnick was on there explaining when he was on the transition committee, this is how they viewed people and brought people in. And one of the key considerations was they had to be telegenic. They had to be able to communicate. And I think that's a really critical piece of the Trump administration, is that everyone in the cabinet can communicate what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're going to do it. And I think that's important for the American populace to say, oh, this is why energy matters. Or even looking at Secretary Duffy of Transportation. Oh, we spent how much on DEI, but we didn't upgrade air traffic control. That's
Right.
weird. So when you look at this A/B test, right? Trump 1, Biden, Trump 2, it's pretty easy to see just the priorities of spending money. But back to the communication, the telegenic piece. Scott Bessent, in all of his public facing statements, has said, I clamored to get into government because I felt like this was existential. Our debt, our deficit, and where we were going was so mismanaged. I'm a macro guy. This is what I saw. But I also think that for a long time, it's been Wall Street's turn. And it can also be Main Street's turn, like in a parallel sense. And so back to the Democrat chart and the pain that people feel at the grocery store, it's time for the parallel economy. And there's a couple of ladies who are working on this pretty hard too, and they should be mentioned. And that's Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, and then Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer. They're really focusing on bringing back trade school, making sure money goes into trade school, and having vocations that pay a good salary. So you're not investing in a college education, because for now, white males in particular can't make any more money with a college degree than they would otherwise. So focusing on some of those employment issues, number one, and then the ag realignment. How do American farmers grow? Because if a farm is making money, then the local community makes money, and et cetera. And then there's one more lady I'd mention, and that is Kelly Loeffler at SBA. Like, she was a CFO. She understands what it means to do business. And she's pretty clear in communicating, like, SBA loans money, and we want to have a vested interest in your success. And maybe we're going to start co-investing. These are like paraphrases, but like, how can you launch successful businesses to make money? That is the singular goal of this administration for the United States as a whole and for its population. And I think that's really incredible. Again, communicating that to the American public, but the lag time in when will you see more money, I think that will show up in when you file your taxes after, the big, beautiful bill and some of these other remits that will take effect. I think there's an absorption rate. That's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah. And we have to start to realize, we had people give their opinions, professional opinions, on what they thought was going to happen. It hasn't panned out as dark as everybody wanted. It's probably not as positive as what we've heard, but it is going in the right direction. We are getting deals from other countries, and they are more fair than what they were before. Again, I'll take all those kind of wins we can get. I love the energy stuff. I think that's great. And this also improves I would, this is just Pete thinking this, but as we dig ourselves out of this hole and become the hottest country in the world, other countries are going to want more of us and partner with us more. We've burned a lot of that international political capital by getting things wrong, causing conflict. We are the only country I know of that openly talks about regime change against other countries as if that's normal fucking business. God damn. And I'm just going to call Secretary Clinton out because she's gotten a lot of stuff wrong. When she openly told the Pakistan people to throw over their government. Oh my God, you're Secretary of State. You can't say that. These are the things that people say, and it makes us look like monsters to other countries. They want us to be strong, but they don't want us to be insane.
You're correct. And I have a research project, a deep research project pending on Secretary Clinton and things that she said and her actions and the things that she's done. And some of these new releases of she was on heavy tranquilizers during the campaign and she would go from moodiness to cheerfulness, and she has all these health defects. And I mean, if we didn't know that, watching her pass out and getting
Yeah.
thrown into the Suburban like a side of beef there at the 9/11 memorial in 2016, like she has a very pronounced reputation as being a very wicked woman. A lot of deceit. And what was the quote from the released files? Like, just a thirst for power. So that would just be one of the things that she got wrong. Benghazi and a whole host of other things. Like, I don't have respect for her reputation, and as somebody who studies female leadership in diplomacy and defense, she's not on the heroine side of the ledger, that's for sure. I think she got a lot of it wrong, to be honest.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
having to
Yeah.
be heavily tranquilized, I feel like health impairment, cognition, substance illness is a key component of leadership analysis, and I spend a lot of time on that. And anybody that's ever had a grandpa knew that Joe Biden wasn't there, but also anyone with 5 minutes of health advocacy would have seen that Secretary Clinton wasn't a healthy specimen and not fit for work. So she's a really interesting case, as well as all
Yeah.
the positions that she advocated for. So the Pakistani one is just one of her many
Yeah, I picked that one because
fails.
it's just, yeah, her attitude
For
about
sure.
Afghan governance, it's bad. And I doubt that anybody's going to get in trouble for all the Russiagate nonsense that they put together. I just don't think anybody's going to see a minute in jail time, and there won't be any accountability. And look, I'm not craving anybody to go to jail, but if what has been reported, if what's going before possibly a federal grand jury now, if any of that's real, someone has to go to jail, and that someone should be a very big name. I know for sure. I'm a former counterintelligence agent. You cannot have TS anywhere outside of a SCIF. Not in your garage, not on a server, not on your phone. You can't remove portion markings. All of that is against the law. And all of these leaks and all of these compromises we have had in the government makes me think, because again, this is my job, right? If I was an adversary of the United States, I'd just go to DC and park and just make friends and just spend 25 years building a network of people that I could turn into sources, because these folks refuse to hold themselves accountable. When you realize, oh no, you just cut the piece of paper off that has all the portion markings that says TSSCI on it, you can't do that. You've broken the law. We now have to self-report. Now look, you self-report and you're like, new kid, intern, whatever, right? You can talk your way out of it. But if you don't report, now it's against law. All of those security officers associated with all of these political elements that have been compromised, and those guys didn't report, that's supposed to be jail time. And if you or I did that, oh my God, we'd go to jail right away. Our name would be all over the paper and they would ruin our lives. But this is like, I don't know a single SSO, that's a security officer, everybody. I don't know a single one of their names. And they did all of these things. Dianne Feinstein had a spy on her staff. A Chinese
For
spy.
like 20 years or something, right?
Yeah.
I think
No
it was like
big
an
deal.
excessive amount of time.
Right. Just promoted up the ranks, right? That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I would do. I would just give me 20 years and I'll give you whatever you want. I'll get everything along the way and it'll pay for itself. And they'd give me all the money I need. And so of course that's happening. And of course, people from Belgium, people from China, people from Laos, they all have agency in DC. And if we won't hold ourselves responsible, now I don't know who anybody's beholden to. And that's the whole reason why we have these clearances and do background investigations, to understand if you're exploitable. But DC is exploitable. I mean, they can't let that power go. And I think Hillary Clinton is one of the worst examples of that. She sought power at every cost all the time. I'm not a fan of hers because I've worked and I've seen how she does stuff, and I've seen her State Department face to face. I don't care about the political side of things because I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, but I do care about the quality of people and if they're able to do their job. And folks like Hillary Clinton make me not confident in my own government.
I think that's fair, but I also think we're on the precipice of really finding out, like adding a lot more pieces of this puzzle in into place. So I think
Yeah.
you referenced a grand jury has been convened. I do believe that's the case. I think it's rumored to be in South Florida, which circulates around the Mar-a-Lago raid and really what the pretext was for that raid. So I think we'll get really interesting, but it goes from this micro level, right? Is this a documents case? Really, the National Archivist needed these things so badly that they had to go into the former First Lady's underwear drawer. It was just so important.
Right.
Like you and I both watched that and thought, like, oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't track for me. That doesn't make sense
Right.
to me. So I think
They didn't raid a
it's
drug lord's house looking for drugs and money, right? It's yeah. That
so,
imbalance has to change. Yes, please.
and a lot of that discussion like can be cocktail conversation all the way up to this is of preeminent national security interest. This is a paramount case of what is our relationship with Russia? Was it damaged because of this cover your butt? I have a server in my bathroom. Whoops, I need to distract and throw smoke over here and then disparage this candidate. I think we're going to find out a lot, but the core of my research has always been the agent actor making decisions because states don't make decisions. Ukraine, for instance, doesn't make decisions. Its leadership makes decisions. Zelensky, in particular, I thought at the time when I wrote my dissertation about him, like this is a leader who is unprecedented and facing this whole scale war, this invasion, who's new on the scene, hasn't been tested. But what is he saying to rally international favor, alliance, and support? Like this individual is making a difference. If someone else was here, substituted in his place, would this have a different outcome? And I think we can see that same thing in the United States. The individual, the leadership at the top makes a difference of what happens and doesn't happen. And Secretary Clinton would be one of those very significant players. The downline from all of her decisions at state, or should she have been elected president, would be a whole different thing. And I would say the same thing about Kamala Harris. Last year, when I was lecturing a lot about female-led diplomacy and discourse, and Harris was front running for the election, I had to explain, like, take a look at her body of work, her decision making. It is just one failure after another. She's a border czar. She says she owns the Afghanistan withdrawal. Like, really pay attention and not be confused by your anti-Trump positionality that you think he's going to sacrifice Ukraine. You think that the case for Ukraine is made with Kamala Harris. Like, that is just really poorly understood. Her decision making, her capabilities, and her leadership. Like, really be clear that we shouldn't foreclose around her as a candidate and the savior of this conflict in Eastern Europe because you don't like or you think that Trump has done a thing. What he has said, again, this is from my research, to say NATO needs to spend more in its own defense. NATO countries need to spend more in their own defense. And turns out they are going to spend more. They're going to spend 5% like he's been pushing for. But to say someone else would be better or we prefer based on some of these like softer considerations, like they thought Harris was more likable or she didn't have the this was the thing. It really was. And again, I felt like, am I here as the only American, as the Trump apologist? And I really hated being put in that corner because I would say, this is data. I'm looking at it. These are her spoken words. This is her body of work. This is her resume, if you will. I also am a California citizen, and I can tell you what happened with her as AG. And you don't want this on a global scale. You do not want this. This isn't correct. She's not qualified to be there. She's qualified for other things, but not that. So I really think you should quit making her your prominent solution to all things Ukraine. So now where we're at is, I think it looks very promising for a solution in Ukraine. If we want to dig more into that, I think that solutions abound. I hope that some of them can be leveraged and as good of outcome as possible is available, but it wasn't going to be through the leadership of those two ladies.
Yeah, when so like you, California, long time, and I listened and I believed what Kamala Harris said. That isn't to her benefit, by the way, everybody. She acted like I was a monster. She acted like she hated most Californians and wanted to change this place. And I look around and I think, we have all these natural resources. We have several natural ports. We have a gigantic timber industry waiting to be used. All these things. We have wonderful weather. We have all the things that a state should have to have abundance. And we haven't. And we've turned these things off. We didn't manage our forests. This is nothing to do with Republicans and Democrats. It's just a fact. Talk to anybody in that industry who know about forest fire, and they'd be like, "You guys are insane." And when we see these things, and I hear her talk, I'm thinking, I can't vote for that person. Not even a good conscience. Like I'm terrified of what would happen when President Biden made her the border czar, and she wouldn't go down to Texas. I got in my truck and I went down there, and I talked to the judge that runs the response in Del Rio, Texas, and he sat on my show and he talked to me, and it was great. He's a Democrat. He's like, I'm a Democrat. Here's the problems, and he explained it all. And we talked candidly about it because that's how hard it is. You get in your pickup truck and you go down there. Okay, Vice President has more of an entourage than I do. That's fine. But it was her fucking job. And when you see that kind of incompetence, when you see someone who never won a delegate in her own right, I've won as many primary delegates as she has in her career. That's fact. Always going to be a fact. When I saw President Biden magically become the leading candidate after primarily losing in the primaries, and then all of a sudden he runs and hides in the basement and doesn't come out in a politic. Amber, I struggle to take that seriously, and I want desperately for there to be a powerful and sane and good Democratic Party that gives us different options and alternatives. That is not what we have right now. I hope the Republicans take this chance to find good people to help take over when President Trump is done, because I'm afraid that they won't either. I mean, we have to get better people. Scott Bessent's great. Butnick is great. I love that we got qualified people at energy and ag and all that kind of thing. But it's both sides have to do a better job of being better about this and not just look out for themselves. Russiagate tells me that Democrats thought Democrats were more important than Americans. And I won't have that. I'll never support that. All right, Pete's going to get off the soapbox now.
I don't support that either, but I think you pointed out something pretty critical, and that is the leadership piece. So individuals at the cabinet level, what they're doing, what their focus is, their talents and their qualifications, that impacts the daily policy that impacts each of our lives. And I think that's important in the American sense. And Secretary Rubio at state, like, I know he has 3 other jobs. Back to the National Archivist, he also does that. He does a lot of things, but he is very clear on his conceit, what he's empowered to do, what America's supposed to be doing, and he's also just very clear on Israel, Hamas, and that their Hamas's failings are of their own making entirely, and the savagery and the deprivation, the hardship, those are all Hamas. He's very clear on that. But positioning the United States as a sovereign power with strength, and sovereignty and wealth, I don't think he's getting it wrong. And so when you're looking at organizations or leadership, whether it's state level or a corporation, having the clarity of what is your mission, governance, and purpose, what are you here to do, what achieves those goals, how do you keep the lights on at your company, but how do you keep the lights on in the United States and continue doing what you're doing? What we were doing was unsustainable. And I don't think anyone really took steps to address that. And I think that's the most important part. But for people to re-underwrite their assumptions and their beliefs is a cognitive feat. You start to get hardwired onto these pathways and you're like already decided. So it's physically uncomfortable to take in new information and process it without that confirmation bias. You almost get an error when you hear something that you didn't previously know or believe in, for most people. So to take it in to say, wait, tariffs, I heard those were bad. I went to Economics 101 100 years ago, and tariffs are bad and the Great Depression, but yet the president of Switzerland is flying here to discuss the 39% tariff on Switzerland. Now, when has Switzerland ever gone anywhere and done anything And of course, there's lots of memes that are like, the Swiss are scared everyone will find out that Toblerone is made in Slovakia. So there's a lot of jokes about it too. But what are their exports? What's their exposure? And a lot of that is pharma. But president is coming here to work that out. I also hear that there's a peace deal to be had with Armenia and Azerbaijan, probably Friday. I think those leaders are coming to the United States as well.
Miracle.
So the paradigm shift is important. And you don't have to, like, neither of us have to fully understand it or be in support of all the things, but to say, was the way we were doing it correct? Was it yielding the results that we wanted? Like, you wouldn't have been able to run a corporation that way. You would have had to close the doors a long time ago. No lights on, no employees, nothing happened. It's just that we can take on sovereign debt and keep running it and taxing our people and our industry to keep paying for, what do they say, Sesame Street in Iraq and all the circumcisions all over Africa and all these weird projects, when really it's back to that main street. Can we have jobs? Are we safe? Are we secure? Where are the criminals? What about a proper immigration policy? And I do like one thing that's said a lot by the administration is like, these are common sense policies. And maybe reference back to that 80-20, or is it the 99-1? Like, what do people really want?
That's a good point.
And I have a couple friends that are like, I'm totally willing to pay more in taxes to have my social concerns. It's like, you have been paying more in taxes to have your social concerns. I would prefer to go to Greece with all my family and have more vacations instead of paying for these like agendized, like highly subjective passion projects that I work half the year than to pay my taxes to fund, decided by somebody else, prioritized by somebody else. I would like to keep more of my income to do the things that I'd like to do with my large and growing family. So that's really how I look at it. Just kind of the basic A, leadership piece, but B, what are mainstream Main Street ideals? And I don't know, I think most people are pretty simple and pretty pragmatic, and like, this has never been delivered to them before in this way.
Right. Yeah. The approach is different. Getting Switzerland off the couch. How about getting a deal with Japan, where Japan is opening their market? Holy shit! These are incredible.
Rice.
It's almost uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable thinking about Hillary Clinton and all of the physical things that are being revealed from these papers. And again, assuming that all that stuff's true, why wouldn't it be? I don't know. I mean, it was apparent she wasn't doing well, but she had a reasonable excuse. It's hard to politic. I get all that, but it makes me uncomfortable that that's what was the cabal that was going on, that was hiding that and everything else. But also not surprised to hear that. I've been listening to Steve Bannon talk because I want to hear what people say. I don't want anybody else to edit it for me. And I hear that man saying, we need to tax the rich. They've had too much for too long, kind of in the Scott Bessent camp. And I'm like, that's not the Steve Bannon I've been told like to think about. Like, I'm hearing a guy that is talking about history and how things move and second and third order effects and describing what they actually are, talking about hemispherical defense. And I'm thinking, well, this is a reasonable dude. I may disagree with him. He may not be able to accomplish these things, but this is a guy that's super clear on where he's going and how he's advising the boss on how to get there. And what it includes, the very thing that the left wants, taxing the rich. And I'm like, well, what's the problem with Steve Bannon? Why are we mad at this guy? And this brings me back to the Israel picture, and then I'm going to shut up and let you talk. When I think about Israel and I turn my war brain on, I realize that there's an information operation going on, right? And that's designed, that's how Hamas can fight. They can't fight toe to toe with Israel. Nobody can, right? And so, like, most of if we're going to use the screen as a thing, there's the information operation, right? Okay, then you got how much people hate Jews. That's this much. It's like we're running out of space for anything else. And then you got all the little things that you would stick in there. How much people hate the right in Israel, how much people hate Netanyahu just because he's not in their thing, how much American hate is towards Netanyahu. These are things that are unreasonable in terms of this guy's been the prime minister most of the last 30 years. And so we have all this stuff that clouds and gets in the way of if Israel has done anything wrong. And we listen to John Spencer about this and we find out that it's not nearly that much at all. I'm just being fed a bunch of bullshit. because this is political, it's information operations, and it has very little to do with Israel's fight against a terrorist organization that should have no say in anything. That they could have quit Hamas could have quit a long time ago and said, we're sorry, we've lost the military thing, we don't want everybody else die, I guess we were wrong. They could have surrendered a long time ago unconditionally, and all the violence would have stopped, because there's not really a genocide going on. The Jews don't really want to kill the Gazans if they don't have to. That's just not what happens. But Hamas won't quit. It's a battle of wills, and they're going to die because of it. And it may ruin any chance of there being a West Bank that has any kind of Palestinian hold, because they actually, unlike everybody else, we hear it's an existential threat, and we're like 22-0 against those things as they've come up the last couple of years. It really is existential for any kind of Palestinian state. They may not exist. They may be Palestinians, but they, like Rhodesians, will walk the earth without a country. So that's what I have to say about all that stuff, is that it is uncomfortable to think about Steve Bannon and agreeing with him, because I've been led to believe that he's insane. And then I hear him talking, I'm like, there's a lot of smart stuff in there. So you're right. We should all challenge ourselves. We should read things that we don't like. We should listen to people, what they say on whatever show they're on. Podforce One is great. There's all kinds of places you can watch any of these folks talk. And if you can stomach it, maybe you'll hear things that you agree with. But we have to be able to withstand their existence. And also the fact that President Trump is the boss right now, and he gets to make these decisions. You mentioned it earlier. He's the top cop. He's the top general. He's the top of all these parts of the government, and he's treating it like a business, and that's what he gets to do. So whether you like that or not, he is afforded that luxury, and elect somebody else in next time. Hopefully it's somebody good. All right, I'm going to shut up now and let you wrap us up.
Okay, my wrap up. We covered a lot there. So
yeah.
One of my colleagues was part of the Arafat Clinton period of time. He was on the Israeli side, and he was translating the documents that would have allowed for a state, a Palestinian state, translating between Arabic and Hebrew and English. And he watched that implode in real time. And Bill Clinton has been very, very granular in his detail to say, this is what was offered. 99.9% or some such of what they asked for, and they walked away many, many times. So I think one of the key parts of the current political climate is there's not as I called it, the Hamas lobby in the United States government right now. There's a lot of clarity there, because I think the Biden camp was trying to undermine Netanyahu, and a lot of that information spilled out into the public discourse. So now people are radicalized, if you will, against Israel. And again, they can't name what river or what sea. And that's the problem, is being really loud, really vocal, or trying to defund aid to Israel, when really it just goes back to buying armaments and material in these constituencies of the person who's voting against such aid. And that's a broken system. And the same thing goes with Ukraine, when people want to rally against Zelensky and what he's doing and the kleptocracy that they think it is. Again, they don't know a thing. What they're really saying, in my opinion, and I'll translate, is I don't want to keep paying taxes to fund this thing that I don't know anything about. I just want more take-home pay. So I'm going to vilify whoever it is, these two foreign leaders, because most people cannot name other foreign leaders. It's these two gentlemen, and they have to be the epitome of all the broken things of the system. And so that's a lot of the public sentiment, in my opinion. But I don't think it's without solution if you want to just remove feelings from it and stack up some wins for peace, because this is a brush I get painted with a lot of time. Like, oh, you're a female and you talk about females, so you obviously want to be talking about peace building every single second. And that's not correct. And I've even told my AI helper, like, never ever say peacemaking in any response to me ever, because that's not what I focus on. What I focus on is leadership and leadership decision making and the foreign policy analysis around those decisions. And I think that having clear-eyed leadership, regardless at the state level or the national level, or even in organizations leadership, like businesses like Anduril, for instance, or Palantir, who are very clear on what national defense looks like and sovereignty, like having some clarity and being able to look for a signal, not noise. I think it's really important. And I don't know, I have a lot of optimism about the direction. And I think part of that optimism for the direction of the United States has to do with some of the optics. I think we've been given some very, if you will, aura oriented photographs of what the United States is doing and the direction they're going. And that translates to positive public sentiment. If you give it a minute to say, do I enjoy this visual of this massive American flag flying out in front of the White House? Why wasn't that there before? Like, really think about the iconography of that. Or President Trump welcoming Keir Starmer into his Scottish manor, and then Ursula von der Leyen coming in the next day to ink this massive deal. Like, there are some things that should really give optimism and hope just in terms of the optics of it, because it's different than what you've ever seen before. You're not seeing an American president on an apology tour through the Middle East. You're not seeing the shame. And I think this bolsters civic engagement, which leads to one of the points you made, is like, how do we get good people, good governance? Like, how do we rebuild institutions? And I think that's part of it, is having some confidence in like the possibility of what's coming next.
I love it. What's coming next? Well, everybody, to learn more about Amber's work, you can always go over to her website, amberbrittain-hale.com. I'm going to put that link up here in a second so that I find that thing. It's at the top of this thing where it is. And look, it's been great to have you on. We shouldn't take so long the time between visits, because it took us a long time just to even get started on the conversation. But I really appreciate you coming on. You all also follow her on X, same kind of thing, Amber Brittain-Hale. You can find her. It's not hard to find. But that's how you support these folks. That's how you support people who go out and look after these things. Yeah, don't put women in a box and say, oh, you're into babies and peace, because that's just, women can do anything they want. And they're good at it. And you can hear how smart Amber is and what she does. It's incredible. I love talking to you. And I know other folks are going to love hearing from you too. So everybody out there, it's not so bad, right? Just go out and let's see if we can get the prices down at Costco a little bit.
If we could start with Costco.
On vacation.
Go to Greece. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.